So this is a conversation in the series of life challenges. And today I'm speaking with Joan Tollifson about cancer as an awakening journey. And Joan was diagnosed with cancer in November 2017. So Joan, if you want to just share with us whatever details you feel are relevant. We can start with that.
Okay. Well, the cancer that I have is an anal cancer that traveled up my rectum and invaded my vagina. So it's a cancer that is occurring, or was occurring, hopefully it's gone. It's a cancer that was occurring in all of these parts of the body that are not supposed to be mentioned aloud in polite company. And so it's been a kind of interesting journey into the bowels of the human experience, because I've been dealing with a lot of poop and up close and personal, a lot of poop. I had a colostomy, which means my intestine comes out my belly, and there's a bag there now in which the poop goes. And sometimes the bag pops off and I wake up covered in diarrhea and things like that. And a friend of mine was kind of joking with me that in Tibetan Buddhism, they send the monks out, and in other forms of Buddhism too, they send the monks out to the graveyard to contemplate death and impermanence, and that I was being given a very advanced practice of contemplating poop and contemplating the bowels of the human experience. And in a way, that's how it's felt. And early on, I just decided, well, I have this cancer in all these unmentionable places, and all the side effects are occurring in these unmentionable places. Well, not all of them, but a lot of them. And I just decided I'm going to say it all out loud, because that's part of what I'm wanting to do in my book that I'm writing on aging and dying, is that I really want to put out there some of the grittier aspects of aging that often get sort of airbrushed out of the picture. Not in a way that I hope will be terrifying or horrifying or disturbing to people, but in a way that will say this is all part of what is. This is part of the human journey. This is part of what is. And so I've been speaking all the forbidden words and talking about it very openly. And I think the fact that it has been such a sort of journey into the bowels of the human experience has been part of how it's been an awakening journey for me, because it really has grounded me in some way in the grittiness, the nitty-gritty of everyday life. And I think in some way, some part of that would be true with any cancer, or any illness, that you're suddenly faced with death. Like when I was diagnosed, I asked the question, I said, well, what would happen if I do nothing? And they said, well, you'll be dead in a couple of weeks or more of a bowel blockage. And and at that moment when they said that, I realized I did not want to be dead. I had a it was very clear, I do not want to die right now. I want to finish this book. I don't feel finished with my life. And so I'm going for the treatment. And I think any kind of major illness or catastrophe or whatever, kind of immediately all of your more trivial problems sort of drop away, and you're brought face to face with what really matters in life. And I think in a way it was even heightened by the fact that it was this experience in the bowels of the human experience, that aspect of it. And so I found myself just really present in the present moment and just being with what is, whether it was changing my bag or dealing with poop or working on my book or going to radiation treatments or whatever it was. I had chemotherapy and radiation, and I had surgery all in the last few months. The chemo and the radiation are over now, and the side effects are gradually diminishing, but I still have a little. Anyway, so it really brought me more fully into the present in some way, and certain issues, like I'd had this for years. I mean, ever since I started holding meetings and giving talks, which was back in 1996, ever since then, I've had this sort of ongoing ambivalence about why am I doing this? I don't have ambivalence about writing books or my writing. It's always about holding meetings and giving talks. And it's just been this kind of ongoing ambivalence that's a mixture of, I don't know, various things, including self-doubt. And it was interesting that in the middle of this cancer, that just fell away. It just disappeared. It was like the doubter disappeared. The one who was worried about this disappeared. And it wasn't as if it was replaced by the opposite. You know, it wasn't like, oh, now I'm really clear this is my mission in life and I feel complete confidence. It wasn't like that. It was just like the problem wasn't there. It was just like, well, this is what you're doing. You just do what you're doing unless maybe you're not doing it at some point. And so it kind of, in that way, it just kind of, grounding is the word that keeps coming up. It just felt grounding, but grounding not in some transcendent, beyond it all kind of place, but grounding in the groundlessness of just being here, not knowing what this is, not knowing why we're here, not knowing whether consciousness is an epiphenomenon of the brain or consciousness was here before we don't need any of that. Just there just is what is, just this present happening and this awareing presence, and they're not separate. And so it was just a really, I can't say it was a new waking up to that, because that's been realized for many years, but it was a clarity, a deepening. In some way, it was a waking up to that, and or a kind of falling away of some of the debris that was still in the way, or whatever. And also, I was just deeply moved by the love and the support I got from friends and people who knew me through my work, and it really showed me something about love and community, and that moved me very deeply. So I don't regret any of it. I mean, I would of course prefer not to have an ostomy bag, and but I don't regret that this has happened to me. It really has felt overall like a very positive journey and a blessing. And I have to say that the side effects were not as bad as what I had anticipated. I had been told what to expect, particularly from the radiation, that there were basically just going to be burning pain in my entire genital anal area. And, so I was expecting continuous level 10 pain for like weeks on end. And I really didn't know if I was going to be able to handle it. And it wasn't like that. I mean, there was pain, and it would shoot up sometimes to level 10, but only for brief bursts. Most of the time it was much lower than that. It wasn't the kind of pain where you just feel like you can't bear it. And I had, I had expected that the chemo might bring nausea and things like that. And I didn't have that. They've really improved the delivery of these things so that they've mitigated a lot of these side effects, I think. But, and I did get some other side effects like open sores on my hand and stuff like that, and I had a lot of energy in the beginning. It was kind of amazing because I'd expected fatigue and I was quite energized. And then towards the end, I started getting more tired, and I still have a little bit of that, but and in many ways, the treatment was quite wonderful. I mean, I had deep connections with some of the technicians, like the radiation technicians. One of them had a daughter who was gender fluid and lesbian, and we talked about growing up gender fluid. Another of them had a mother who had an ostomy and a daughter who had one arm just like me. And so, we connected in some very deep ways, actually. it was, I enjoyed meeting the other patients that I would meet in the waiting room, and meeting all these people who were the kind of people I wouldn't meet otherwise, because they were, different ages, different types of people and stuff. And I love people. So I found that very rich and rewarding, actually, and fun and enjoyable in many ways. And I felt lucky because so many of the people I met, other patients at the cancer center, were, had been going through just one cancer after another, and were going to be on chemo for the rest of their lives. And I felt very blessed that I had something much shorter. I mean, of course, it's not completely over. They have to evaluate if the cancer is actually gone, and there may be future surgeries, and so I'm not done. But hopefully, they've been very hopeful about the prognosis and everything. So all things considered, it's been a truly marvelous journey that I don't regret, even though it certainly has had some uncomfortable moments. And the ostomy is, particularly because it's a little more difficult to deal with it with one hand, is presenting some challenges. Like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to travel with it. I mean, maybe, hopefully I can, but I'll have to work out something different than how you're doing it now, if I'm going to be able to take a plane flight across the country or anything like that. And so, there's the possibility that I might never travel again or whatever. And just kind of, none of that has bothered me in some way. It's just sort of like, well, this is how it is. If I have this, they may be able to rehook the bowel. That's one possibility. But, if they can't do that, I'll have this ostomy bag forever. And then that's just how it is. If I can't travel anymore, well, I can't travel anymore. And so there's just been a kind of acceptance. I wasn't trying to. Someone's unmuted, I think, because funny noises.
Whoever unmuted themselves, can you? Oops. Oh dear. Okay, hold on just a sec. Okay, so let's see, I have to unmute you again. Okay.
Oh, okay. So maybe that's enough, just as a sort of introduction to what I've been through.
Yes.
It was diagnosed in November. I mean, there were a lot of signs that showed up over the last couple of years that they misdiagnosed. And when I got back home from the SAN conference in November, brown stuff started coming out of my vagina, and that's when I knew something was really wrong, because I had felt like something was kind of wrong, because there's a hole now between my rectum and my vagina, and because the tumor went in there. So and that got me to the doctor immediately, and they diagnosed me within a day with malignant cancer. And I had a colonoscopy the day after that, and surgery a couple weeks later, and radiation and chemo starting a few weeks after that. So it's all happened very quickly over a relatively short period of time. So, and I'm sure there are people, here, including you, Grace, who have also had cancer or other illnesses and things of this nature that they're dealing with, or a partner has. So feels like I'm definitely not alone in this.
Yes, it's certainly a lot of people who are dealing with cancer these days, or dealing with cancer in people they love, their family, friends. It's everywhere these days. And I'm just very struck as I'm listening to you, because my cancer experience is quite a few years back now. As I'm listening to you, I'm struck by, and that's something that I remember too, is how this whole experience, it kind of makes it brings the body into much clearer focus than it usually is in our awareness, because the body is ill, the body is treated, you know, there's a lot of attention that all of a sudden focuses on the body.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we say it was like a journey into the bowels of the human condition, you know, it is interesting because my sense is that, you know, any illness is a journey into the body, you know,
You can't ignore the body. I mean, you know, it's like so many spiritual teachings that say you are not your body, which is a pointer I never have liked. I don't think we're limited to the body or encapsulated inside the body. And I don't think the body is a solid, persisting thing. But, you know, I don't think we're not the body. I mean, we are the body. And you know, these transcendent teachings sometimes make it seem like the body is nothing. And when you have something like this, the body is very real and you can't deny it.
Yes. Well, maybe, you know, that's a first point to really reflect on. I mean, you know, I would agree that I'm not my body because you know, what I refers to for me these days is really awareness, you know, it's presence, it's the light of being, whatever you want to call it. And the body is part of that. It's an expression of that. And it's very real in that sense. So, you know, when you go through physical illness or difficulty, you know, it is very real and it kind of comes into focus. And at the same time, maybe I'll share that about my cancer experience. I don't know how that was for you, but cancer often brings up a lot of fear.
Fear?
Fear, yes. You know, for me, I had never been afraid of death. And all of a sudden, there were these waves and waves of fear that would rise into my consciousness, especially at night. You know, I would lie awake with fear. And it was like this, you know, it was like I had no idea where that fear came from, but here I was, and all I could do, sometimes it would totally swamp me. And other times I was just able to feel it more physically as the physical agitation it was, and see the thoughts, you know, that were going into the future. Maybe this will be my death. And I was very clear, interestingly also, we exchanged about that already, that it wasn't my time to die. You know, that becomes very clear because also I have experience with other people who are diagnosed and who kind of know that that's their way of going, of leaving their bodies, and who then have to navigate the wish of others for them to stay alive, and also their own fear of death, of actually dying, even though they know that's what it's going to be for them. So it brings up this huge issue of our own, you know, our own death, the death of the body, and you know, to me, what it felt like at the time was that fear was kind of inbuilt in the body. The body doesn't want to die. You know, the body wants to survive. You know, there's all this kind of conditioning. Or it may also be part of the human psyche that, you know, we don't want to look at death. We're afraid of going there. We're afraid of entertaining the idea. But then, curiously enough, I had never been afraid. For me, it was always like, well, you know, I mean, life is temporary. But when I was faced with this possibly fatal illness, somehow this fear came up, and it was just a total surprise for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we never know what's going to come up in a certain situation until we're in it. You know, it's easy to say, oh, I know I won't feel this or that, and then maybe we do. My sense is that the fear of death that other animals have and that we also have as a survival fear is the immediate fear of death. You know, like if you see a bus barreling towards you, there's just adrenaline rushes up and there's a fear that's part of our survival system. But sort of thinking about this might be the end of me, this might be the end of my life, you know, I might be leaving everybody I love, and all those kinds of thoughts feels like a much more human kind of psychological fear. I have never been afraid of death. I have no feeling of ever having been afraid of death. My assumption of what it will be like is that it will be just like going to sleep at night or going under anesthesia. And my experience in deep sleep and under anesthesia is that there's no one left over to, you know, be upset that I'm not here anymore, or that, you know, and I don't feel like whatever this is, this totality is going to end. Obviously, it has no beginning and no end. I don't think of myself as just awareness. I mean, awareness is part of this whole totality. Whatever this is, maybe I would say maybe better not to even put a label on it. But whatever this whole dance is, that includes awareness and everything, that doesn't begin or end. So in that sense, I don't end. But Joan ends, you know, the story of Joan. I mean, in some sense, it doesn't end, like, because everything continues on in a certain way. But anyway, so I didn't experience any fear of death. That's not to say it might not come up if they told me you only have, you know, a month to live. I don't know what would come up, but I've never felt fear of death. What I could tune into feeling some fear. It didn't happen a lot because I didn't think about it a lot, but I could tune into a fear of, you know, because I can be afraid if it's going to come before death, you know, the pain and all of that. And if I thought about the pain, especially, you know, the idea of having level 10 pain continuously, which is what I thought was going to happen, that was scary. And I, you know, didn't know if I was going to be able to handle it. And it was kind of interesting because one of my, you know, fears of old age is that if I live that long, that I'll, you know, could end up in a nursing home with people, you know, nurses dealing with my private parts and stuff like that. And that's always been very scary to me. And so, of course, in the course of this cancer, I was having, you know, what do they call it when they, catheterizations and, you know, people touching all of my private parts and radiation there. And so it was kind of like I went through my worst fear of old age now. And it wasn't really so bad, although it had some bad moments. There was one very painful catheterization, I have to say, but it was survivable, you know. And it was kind of interesting that you know, my like the things that we're scared of, they never quite happen the way we imagine they're going to, you know, like I imagined this unbearable pain and then it didn't happen, you know. And
you know, fear of pain to me is like, it's kind of all in the same category. You know, ultimately it's a fear of being totally, like, you know, stopping to exist, because the fear of pain, of unbearable pain, is that it's so strong that somehow nothing survives that pain, you know, takes over. So it's like, you know, whatever is the object of the fear, the movement of fear is one of trying to stay in control. Trying to kind of survive as this, you know, this body, this mind, this personality, this entity, and, you know, surviving and staying in control, you know, which is really the same thing for the body and the, you know, if it's not
yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
I was going to say my dog, you know, when I would take him to the vet, I mean, he knew as soon as we parked on Broadway in Oakland, he knew that's where the vet was. And immediately his whole body would start just trembling, you know, like he was clearly terrified. And so, you know, that's a dog who doesn't have the complex, you know, our human ability to imagine everything that could happen to us. I mean, a dog is not sitting around thinking about what if in old age I end up in a nursing home, you know, I mean, a dog it's much more immediate, but still there was the recognition that, oh, I'm going to this place that scares me, where they do things that are painful or that I don't like or that scare me or whatever, in whatever way a dog thinks about that. And fear was there, you know. But I think humans, you know, there's that wonderful saying by Mark Twain, that I've been through some terrible things in my life and some of them actually happen. You know, humans have this ability to imagine everything that could happen and suffer over it when it's not actually happening. Yeah.
Well, you know, to me, fear was really a real, dealing with this fear over and over was a real teaching, because, you know, all I could do was try to stay as present as it was as I could to these waves and waves of, you know, fear that happened. And there was a very deep letting go in this, you know. At some point, there was just no, actually it happened over time, but there was just a sense that I knew, there was just the total knowing that I had no control over what was going to happen. And I was just happy to let that control go, you know. And it's been so freeing to let that go, because really it's like we don't have any control.
No,
but you know, we're set up to want to control, so that is part of the body, that's part of our bodily existence, you know. It's not just the enjoyment of life, it's also the, you know, the whatever is there that wants to stay free of pain, want to control things so they're nice and good and agreeable and enjoyable.
That's natural, you know, that we want, of course, we want pleasure and not pain. And, you know, but then we get pain. It's an inevitable part of life, and we don't control that. So we're not really there's no one here that's real. There's no controller here.
Yes.
Doesn't really exist. But yeah, I think powerful emotions can be a deep awakening, like an illness, you know, like, because it's such a powerful force.
And powerful pain also, because it so brings us into the present. You know, there's nothing like pain to face us with what's here.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And also the immediate movement to try and get away from the pain, of course, you know, that arises.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, that's natural. That makes sense that, you know, if you're in pain, you naturally try to do whatever you can to relieve it. I mean, other animals would do that. Anyone would do that. That's just natural. But again, humans do that in ways that are far beyond what any other animal does. You know, as I often say, no other animal smokes and drinks itself to death. You know, we have far more complicated ways of escaping, and some of which work fine, like turning on a movie if you're in pain. Fine, you know, just distract yourself. It works. But, you know, when I was in Zen years ago, we used to have the idea of these long sesshins, these long silent retreats where you just sit for hours in a lotus position in pain. And while I would never want to teach that way myself, and I don't resonate with that anymore, but I did learn something valuable from it, which was that there was just no escape. I mean, you just had to sit there with whatever unpleasantness was going on in your mind, and this horrible pain that was usually there in your knees or your hips or your back or something, or your neck or whatever. And you just had to sit with it, and it could be quite severe. And that I really learned from that that what made the pain worse was the thinking about it and resisting it, worrying about what if this gets worse, and what if I can't take it, and all that. And when I would just completely open to the pain and sort of go into it with awareness, just as pure sensation, suddenly it was interesting. It was okay. It was bearable. Sometimes, it would be, I would notice that it was changing, that it wasn't solid, that it came and went, that it was vibrating kind of, And so that was a big lesson, and carried over to psychological pain also, so, which to me doesn't mean it's not okay to turn on a movie and distract yourself if you're in pain. I mean, I think that's one fine strategy, but sometimes when you can't get away and you can't distract yourself, I mean, it's just like interesting just to be with the pain, and then suddenly it's not what you thought it was, not unbearable anymore. I mean, although when I thought about being in level 10 pain continuously, I mean, it was like, honestly, I was, I didn't know if I was going to be able to do that, if I was going to be able to, be with it in a way that would be, I didn't know if I was just going to end up screaming or something. Mm-hmm. And in a way, there's a sort of acceptance, I think, which is part of the awakening journey, if we can say that. There's just a kind of acceptance of all of it, an acceptance of, I think Katagiri Roshi once said when he was dying of cancer that enlightenment is not about dying a good death. Enlightenment is not needing to die a good death. So, a good death meaning, either a pain-free death or a death in which you're not screaming and moaning, but, you're just there like the Buddha, totally present. Or we don't know what the Buddha was like when he died. Actually, he died of diarrhea and some sort of stomach ailment, apparently. But maybe he was screaming, in pain. We don't know, or moaning. But it's sort of an acceptance of all of that, like an acceptance of the fear that you felt, and an acceptance of the terror that I had when I thought of the pain, or if I had level 10 pain all the time and I couldn't deal with it very well some of the time, and ended up just freaking out. Acceptance of that, if that's what happens, rather than having these ideas that, I'm supposed to be some sort of spiritual person who can just be with everything, and because, yeah, that's a lot of BS in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. I'm also just aware of the fact that when we are diagnosed with cancer or any major illness, like you said, somehow all the routines get disrupted, and it takes us out of our current life in a big way.
Yes.
And so there's all sorts of new experiences, and with any new experience, we tend to be more present to it, because it's new. So the awareness is naturally more open. And I'm wondering whether that's part of why cancer can be an awakening journey, because it really brings us into the present, moment to moment, day to day unfolding of this journey that we had no idea was going to happen.
Yeah.
And that we have no way of knowing where it will take us either. It really throws us into the present, into the moment to moment, in a really big way. And that's, for me, that's part of the gift. It's part of the gift of living in a way that's so obviously in the unknown. And there's ways of kind of glossing over that by saying, okay, I'm just going to trust the doctors, and if they say I'm going to be okay, I'm going to be okay. But they can't know that. I mean,
No,
they can just tell you these are the treatments, and you have your best chance with maybe this one, but then there's also this other treatment, and that could be pretty good too. And like sometimes there's a way of you get all of this thrown back onto yourself, and you have to make choices. Mm-hmm. So again, it's like that there's this being faced with the unknown, and to me, that's a real that is a gift. Mm-hmm. If we're willing to really just be in that unfolding of the unknown.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it brings death right in much closer, like you're saying, because, I remember when they give you this little introductory session about chemotherapy before they give it to you. And so I said, well, what are the long-term effects of this chemo you're giving me? And they said, well, it could cause some other kind of cancer in some other part of the body, a few years down the road. They're very honest about it. It's like we're putting toxic stuff into you, and there might be a price, but this, if you want to survive right now, this is your best shot. And so you kind of, death is right there, like in a much closer way than it ordinarily is, and as a possibility. And all sorts of other possibilities. I mean, they told me they might have to do a major surgery where they took out basically everything in my pelvis, and which they might not be able to save in the radiation. And then, I'd have a pee bag as well as a poop bag. I'd have 2 bags. And I was like, no. I mean, my whole body just was like, no, we're not going there. And if that comes up again, if they tell me that, which they might if this hasn't worked, or something, I don't know what I'll do. I might elect to just end it. I don't know what I'll do. Or maybe I'll say, okay, I can deal with that. I really don't think we know until we're in a situation what we're going to do. But yeah, it does bring death right in there in much closer.
So what would you say, what for you were ways that this was an awakening journey for you, apart from, the bringing you face to face with death?
Well, everything that it brought me into the present in a new way, not a new way. I just don't know how to say it, but it felt like I was more in the present, and that a lot of my, the sort of petty concerns of the psychological self just kind of disappeared, including this, major theme that had been going on for years of, having ambivalent feelings about giving talks and holding meetings, was just gone. It felt like the doubter was gone, like the one who was concerned about this wasn't there or something. And like that aspect of the psychological self had just vanished. And the love that I felt was also just, there was a big sort of heart opening that happened. Taking in the love that I was receiving, and people, just being incredibly generous and in ways that just sort of blew me away, really, and people on my Facebook page, saying they wanted me to be alive, just sort of taking in that, oh, people care about you, they love you. There was a big heart opening. I don't know I can describe any more than that, but just a big heart opening, something about love, and I think just a kind of a deeper clarification around this whole thing about because to me, awareness is not some separate thing out there and I'm just awareness and then the rest of this is just sort of a mistake. To me, it's like it's one whole undivided happening. And so it kind of brought that into greater clarification for me, and the simplicity that I've always pointed to, but that I think just got even clearer, of sort of not needing these big metaphysical conclusions about, there's nothing outside of consciousness, or, these arguments about which comes first, mind or matter, and all of that. Because I really see mind and matter as just two words for this happening, two ways of looking at this happening, whatever this is, and maybe science wants to call it subatomic particles and quarks and wavicles, and Rupert Spira wants to call it consciousness, and Daryl Bailey wants to call it the vibrant dance of existence, and Ramana wants to call it the self, and Buddhism wants to call it emptiness. And, it doesn't really matter what we call it, but that it's one whole undivided happening, and that we don't really need to understand it in that kind of mental way where we have the right label and the right metaphysical picture. That just being it is what's really true. Just being it, just being this moment, which is always happening, whether we're acknowledging it or not. We are just being this moment always. We are just this moment. That's what we are. We are this moment, with including the awareing presence that's beholding it. But that's, when we put it in words, it sounds like, well, there's awareness and then there's the content of awareness, and they're two separate things. And I am the awareness. But I feel like now I much more resonate with the Zen formulation that, form is emptiness and emptiness is form. They're not two, and we use different words to sort of point to and highlight different aspects of this whole happening, but we're not really talking about separate things, and so it's really brought that into sharper focus for me, just the groundlessness and the just simplicity of just being this moment without trying to have some metaphysical conclusion about it.
Isn't that exactly like, an understanding of non-dual teaching? I mean, like the essence of non-dual teaching, There is no two, there's no mind or matter, or
right.
Because really, the mind wants to put categories.
And that's useful in a certain way.
Yeah.
It has served its purpose. Yeah.
And it can be fun. It can be fun to, play around with all of this. Yeah. But what is so helpful is to be just, and I totally agree with you in this, it's to be just in the simplicity of this right now, this moment, washing the dishes.
Yeah.
Cooking some food.
Yeah.
Talking to you.
Yeah, just the simplicity of this, the sound of traffic, whatever it is. And people are like, oh, the sound of traffic, what about enlightenment? The sound of traffic, that is enlightenment. That is what the word enlightenment is pointing to. Just being here, the sound of traffic, the cheeping bird, this conversation. And
emptying your poop bag.
Yeah, emptying my poop bag. Waking up covered in diarrhea, just that. And it's all just kind of happening.
Maybe that's a good time to see whether there are any questions, Joan.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. Maybe I'll put my glasses on.
Let me. You don't have to check. I can do that. Ged raised his hand, so hold on, Ged. I'm just going to unmute you. Where are you? Okay. Okay, good. I've unmuted you. Go ahead.
Can you hear me, Grace?
Yes, we can hear you. Loud
Okay,
and
lovely.
clear.
Thank you. It's Jed. It's pronounced with a soft G.
Jed, sorry.
No,
Hi,
that's
Jed.
fine. Thank you. It's lovely to meet you, Grace, and it's lovely to meet you also, Joe. And it's nice to be here with everybody else. Thank you very much. I have, I think, two specific questions, but you don't have to deal with both of them if there isn't time. One is, did you, before you were diagnosed, did you have your own fixed or perhaps not so fixed understanding of what caused cancer? Did you have any, like, for some reason, the one that springs to mind is that if a person isn't aligned with reality, then there's certain tensions and caused in the body, and those tensions can result to cancer. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, maybe not always. So that's an example that, for some reason, is in mind here.
Well, let me take that question and then come back for the other one, the one at a time.
Okay.
I don't have any idea about what causes cancer. I've heard many different theories. The one that makes the most sense to me personally is that a lot of our diet and a lot of the, just toxins that are in our world now may be carcinogenic, but I really don't know. I think the mind-body is one whole event, so certainly emotional states in the mind may have something to do with it. I mean, clearly some of our greatest spiritual teachers, Ramana Maharshi, Nisargadatta, Suzuki Roshi, I mean, there's a long list of spiritual teachers who had cancer or died of cancer. So, supposedly enlightened beings who had cancer. So I'm personally very adverse to, notions about that we you got cancer because you you were unbalanced in some way, or you chose to get cancer or whatever. And I think there's probably multiple things that can play into how something comes about, and we probably never really know. Even if we can identify something like a particular bacteria or something, we don't really know how it happens that one person is susceptible to that and another person isn't.
No, it's true. So bearing that in mind, did you find that when the doctors were perhaps giving you, I don't know if they gave you reasons for the cause, or because medicine is science-based, it seems very certain of its knowledge of cancer. Even if it doesn't know the ultimate cause, it knows what it knows about cancer, and the medical profession, to an extent, they elevate that above other explanations for the cause. So did you find there was any conflict there with what they were presenting to you?
No, not for me. I mean, I really had great doctors. I liked them all, and I found them to be very open, actually. And I also had physician assistants and nurse practitioners that I would see. There was a whole team, basically. And they were very open. I mean, I asked one of the nurse practitioners or physician assistants, I can't remember who it was, if I could use this marijuana-based product, actually a hemp-based product, CBD or whatever, for this hand sores I was getting. And she said, oh yeah, she said, in fact, that's the thing that seems to work best for most patients that I've known. And so, she wasn't saying, oh no, you have to stick to, this thing that you get at the drugstore or something.
Yeah.
No, they seemed very open to, and nobody told me why I had gotten cancer. They only told me, what kind of cancer it was based on the biopsy, and what stage it was at, and what they told me what they knew, kind of, and they were very open, like I said, about the chemotherapy and everything. Oh yeah, this might cause other cancers. It wasn't like, oh, don't worry, this is fine.
Yeah.
Maybe I can chime in for what it's worth, Jed.
Yeah.
Because when I was first diagnosed with cancer, that was 9 years ago, and I had 2 bouts of cancer. So at the time, I was a therapist in the natural health field, and I had all sorts of theories about what causes cancer. And the thing is, I wasn't supposed to get any because I was living very cleanly. So that threw me for a loop.
Uh-huh.
And that first episode of cancer, actually what that highlighted for me personally was the investment I had in being an alternative health practitioner or complementary health practitioner, and the opposition I had to anything that was traditional Western medicine. So basically, and to me that was a real gift, because I had seen how much of what I was doing and even my identity was invested into this opposition between, alternative health and traditional health care. And I had to let it all go. I had to let a surgeon, deal with the cancer. And it was actually very freeing to let go of all of these ideas and theories I had about, what was good healthcare, what was bad healthcare, what was healing all about. All of that just went out the window. And I was thrown to dealing with cancer in the way that I needed to, because whatever I had tried alternatively actually had failed. And the cancer had grown during the time that I tried to treat alternatively. So, that was such a good humbling, in the sense that it really just was an opportunity to let all of the theories go and just be willing to be in the immediacy of this experience and what it brought up for me. Mm-hmm. And a willingness to, just make the choices that needed to be made. So, we can have all kinds of theories, and that's fun. And yes, of course, good nutrition and emotional health and all that is important. But there's no guarantees, and life is so complex that it's good to hold all of these theories with a certain playfulness,
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. And just listening to you, I kind of realised that the labels themselves of the medical profession or alternative therapy, just fixating on those labels does narrow your focus, and it narrows your understanding. And it's that we're looking to be loosened. It's that fixation to be loosened in order to be more open. But it's so easily done to say, right, the medical profession is science-based, which is how I mentioned it in my question, and therefore this is their approach. But even my own experience isn't the case. That my dealings with the medical profession is that they are individuals, human beings, who themselves have a whole range of influences beyond science and the medical profession. So it's very easily done. Have I got time to ask a small, quick question, or I don't really want to
go ahead. That's fine.
Okay. Joan, I think you said that it was back in, I don't know if you said that you started giving talks back in '96, or if you had like the awakening process kicked off back in '96. If I've got the right date, I don't even know. But what I was wondering is, since whatever that experience was of awakening, is it your experience that it has become more so? Because you mentioned about facing death, putting you more in the present moment. Has that been more so since way back then, that you've always on a daily basis been more present? Is that how?
Well, I have never had a sort of, like, some people seem to have, and actually I think this is relatively rare, but some people seem to have these very dramatic awakenings, like Eckhart Tolle, where, you know, in the course of a few hours or one day or one night, they suddenly, the psychological self just seems to completely fall away, and they are brought completely, we're actually always in the present moment. I mean, we can't be anywhere else. What comes and goes is really the selfing, the thoughts and the stories and the sense of separation and all that. But in some cases that seems to disappear very dramatically overnight. I think in most cases, certainly in my case, that wasn't true. It's been a gradual unfolding, and I think when it's gradual, often we don't even really notice that we've changed, you know? I mean, if everything that has sort of fallen away from me over the last 30 years fell away in one night, I might be like, oh, wow, you know? But because it fell away gradually over so many decades, it's almost sometimes like, well, nothing's, you know, you could say nothing's really changed. In a sense, nothing has really changed. I've always been here now. You know, it's always been now. It's always, you know, there's always just been present experiencing. So awakening really is just waking up to what's already always here. It's not, in my opinion, it's not some, and it's really the seeing through or the falling away of what seems to obscure that. You know, the thoughts about me and my story and all of that. And I don't think that for most people that falls away completely. I don't know if it falls away completely for anyone. Some people claim it does, but and certainly some of us have more or less of it. But you know, in my case, certainly the psychological self can still pop up. You know, there can still be those kinds of me thoughts that are not functional me thoughts. You know, it's not like I know my name and that's functional, but you know. Did you sort of tick off everything from your shopping list of what awakening was supposed to be, and you know you were going to get oneness, emptiness, unconditional love, you know, truth, and you ticked it all off yet? Well, I spent a number of years, you know, sort of chasing this final awakening that any number of teachers seem to be describing. And they would talk about how they never felt that they were a self anymore, you know, like Tony Parsons would say, he's not Tony Parsons anymore, whatever they would say. And so I just spent years, you know, like sort of chasing that kind of final, dramatic, complete experience. And finally, it just really became clear to me that that whole search for that was all about me. It was all about me getting some big thing to happen for me. You know, like my me would fall away so that me could be a better me. And as that became clear, the whole thing just dissolved. The search just dissolved. And you know, the whole thing it didn't catch me anymore. Like if Tony Parsons can say whatever he wants and it doesn't hook me anymore, you know, I'm not like, oh God, I don't think that's true for me. I got to get it.
That's perfect. Absolutely perfect.
And so, you know, it just was the falling away of that. And I don't know, you know, some people may have less of that stuff still going on than I do, and I don't care. It's sort of like all I can be with is what's here, what shows up here.
Yeah, that's such a fantastic answer. And just even the last bit is, you know, whatever anyone else has got, I don't care because I'm absolutely fine with what's happening here. That's a wonderful answer. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Grace. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Jed. Thank you for starting us off with questions. Wondering whether anybody else wants to ask a question. You can also, just to repeat, in raising a hand, you click on the participants button, and you click on the little button in the window that says raise hand. And you can also ask or comment on the group chat. You can click on that. And
there's a 1 on chat. What does that mean?
Sorry, there's a what? Oh, yes, that's me saying feel free to ask questions on the thread here.
Okay. 2 participants have raised their hands.
Okay. All right. Let's see. I didn't see that. Let me check. So there's Bill. Bill, I'm going to unmute you. Bill, you oh, hold on. Hello, Bill. Can you say something?
Yes, I am here.
Okay,
can you hear
good.
me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, wonderful. Hi. This is a wonderful program and very appropriate for me and where I am. Let's see, in December of 2016, I got a second opinion and was told that I had malignant colorectal melanoma cancer and that I had 4 months to live. And I just totally surrendered at that moment to science. And I've had some surgeries and I've been on immunotherapy. My 3rd dose of immunotherapy, my autonomic nervous system crashed, and on and on and on. And I am since back on my 2nd out of 4 full dose immunotherapy treatments. And I have to make a decision before next Friday whether to do the full dose again and face the strong possibility of crashing my autonomic nervous system again, or just doing what my body intuitively, wants me to do. So there's just this dance, between leaning into and trusting the medical establishment versus, trusting what's over here, speaking through this body, and facing the possibility that, one's going to determine my fate or the other. And so my question has to do with, God. It's like, where is God in all this? I've studied Buddhism quite a lot, and when I was in the hospital after my my one and only crash, I had this huge awakening, and egoic Bill or psychological Bill was completely gone, and everything over there was streaming love towards me, and then everything through me was streaming love back over there. And life was just so simple because it was all about love. And, I heard God speak to me, while I was in the hospital. Be still and know I am here. Everything's okay. Just surrender. And so I'm kind of dancing between, Buddhism that really says there is no God, and feeling at times very inspired to have God in my life, and just surrendering to something, something that appears to be palpable, So my question is, like, where is God in all this? And maybe I should be put on mute because I'm in Whole Foods right now.
I love it that you're in Whole Foods. It's
Bill,
well,
can I suggest that as you're listening to Joan's response, maybe you could mute yourself at that point.
Okay. Yes.
Okay, and unmute yourself when you want to come back with a further question.
okay. All right. So, well, I mean, I resonate with the word God, and I think you don't have me on the screen, Grace, just to let you know.
I do have you on the screen. So.
Oh, okay, not what I'm seeing. Interesting. What, you're seeing me?
Yes, I am seeing you. Don't worry.
Okay. Because I'm seeing you, but anyway, yeah. So I resonate with the word God, and to me, I think God means different things to different people. To me, God is just another word for this whole vibrant dance of existence, the wholeness of being, love, unconditional love, awareness, beingness, the self with a capital S, the no-thingness of everything. And, I don't see that God is something other than me or other than you. Everything is God, as I would see it. And so, God speaking to you is sort of, or when we pray, there seems to be a kind of separation, but there doesn't really have to be a separation. It's just like we're talking to each other now, but we're not really two. But there's a sort of appearance of two that allows us to have a conversation, and we can sort of have a prayer or a conversation with God, or listen to God saying something like, be still. So, to me, to me, that's not in contradiction to what I hear in Buddhism. What I think Buddhism, might question is the notion of some sort of separate creator who's running the universe off there somewhere in left field, which I don't believe in, or at least I don't. It doesn't meet my experience. I don't really know if there's anybody off there in left field, but I doubt it. And but it's, what you're describing, like having to make this choice, is a wonderful opportunity to just kind of explore the whole question of where everything comes from, what's the source of all of our actions, and where does a decision come from? Because our mental idea that we've learned is that I, the separate self, am making a choice, and I have to evaluate the different possibilities, and then I could either go with the doctors or I could go with my heart or whatever, and but just to see all that as it's happening, there's just these different poles. There's the voice that says, no, just lay off the medicine, just trust the body. And there's the voice that says, well, the doctors are saying this, they've got a lot of experience, they probably know what they're talking about, I should do that. And just these voices going back and forth. And then at some point, there's a decision that comes up. At some point, you'll find yourself doing one or the other. And you'll either live for many more years or you'll die. Whatever happens will happen. And then the thinking mind posing as me kind of takes credit. Like, I made this decision, and, I could make the wrong decision. But is there really a wrong decision? Or is it all just a flowing wholeness that we could call God, in which you are moved by life to do whichever of those you do in that moment. And then whatever happens, happens. And it's all one whole happening. Call it God. And when that's seen, I think there's a trust in that. And it takes the edge off, this, when we feel like I have to make this decision, it's like very weighty, because it's like, my God, I have to make this huge decision. I could make the wrong decision. I could actually die because I make the wrong decision, but maybe there is no wrong decision. Maybe there's no you in that sense making the decision. maybe God, so to speak, is making all the decisions. And again, I don't mean some separate force. I mean just this. I don't know if that resonates, but.
Bill, do you want to come back? I'll unmute you. You're unmuted. Hello, Bill? Looks like we've lost him. I just feel I want to say something about this. You know, what a beautiful experience. You know, when love becomes so present, you know, it just shines through so powerfully and so totally. And it's, you know, my sense is that we love playing with duality because we love loving. You know, duality allows us to love God. Duality allows us to be comforted by the presence of God in the fear that arises. You know, am I making the right decision? What's happening to me right now? And you know, the voice that says, be still and know I am God, is like the appearance of self in the role of the comforter, you know, the truth, the love that just is. And these moments, you know, like I remember being in the hospital and waiting for the biopsy, which was a minor surgery. And I was sitting there, and all of a sudden I was overcome by this sense that this hospital, you know, all this hospital machinery, the people working there, was just an expression of total love. You know, there was just a sense of such love. And coming from where I was coming from, which was a sense that hospitals were nasty places where people got sick and weren't treated properly and, you know, all that kind of stuff. It was just, I mean, it was just overwhelmingly beautiful. And, you know, I would say, you know, if you love God and you want to relate to God, by all means do, you know, pray for help with the decision. And at the same time, know that this is you as much as the one who receives the love and the truth. You know, it's just a playing out of those roles. Like, you know, at one point I asked my teacher, Gangaji, about devotion. You know, doesn't that assume a duality? Yes, it does, but it's, she said, her teacher said, Papaji, truth and love are like two wings of a bird. You can't have one without the other. And, you know, the love, the devotion, the playing of the duality for the sake of knowing love is just, I mean, to me, it's so beautiful, it's so precious. And, you know, fear sometimes brings us to pray, and, well, that's precious too, because that opens us to love. And so I don't know, I just want to throw the door wide open to love as this aspect of our being that, you know, like Joan, like you said, your experience opened that door much more fully. I mean, wow, you know, if that can happen, that's more than we could hope for. Joan, you're unmuted. You're muted. I'm going to unmute you here. Not sure why you're... Yes, we can hear you.
Grace?
Yes.
There's somebody else who wanted a question, and that we're getting towards the end. Maybe we should...
Okay. Let's see.
I don't know.
I don't see any other raised hands. Let me check the chat.
And I didn't mean to cut Bill off either if he had more to say.
Bill took
but
his...
I was just aware that he took his video down, but
yeah, I'm assuming that he's complete. But Bill, if you want to come back to us, please just feel free to raise your hand. Joan, do you want to comment in the meantime?
No, I mean, I like what you say about love. I mean, I felt a lot of love in the hospital. The nurses were incredible. They were so loving. And I wrote on my Facebook page about a conversation I had with one of the nurses. And I told her I was afraid of the pain that I might be going to have in the treatment. And she said, well, you just have to keep focused on Jesus. That's the way. And I just translated Jesus in my mind into my own language as the now, or presence, or what is, or whatever, you know. And she went on and she said, you know, that's where Peter got in trouble, you know, when he was walking on the water and he had his eyes on Jesus, and then he got distracted and he took his eyes off Jesus, and that's when he started to sink. And I translated, you know, I remember that Peter got distracted by the wind, and I translated that to, you know, just thoughts and worries and all that sort of stuff. And so I said, yeah, I mean, that's right. You got to just stay focused on Jesus, you know. And I mean, she meant something different by it, but maybe in the heart of it, she meant the same thing. I don't know, you know. It's like, I think it's, you know, one of the things I loved about Gangaji, you mentioned her, was that she had this ability to sort of meet whoever was asking a question in their language. So if they were going to talk about Jesus, you know, she would talk about Jesus, you know, and because I think the heart of it, you know, we're all, I don't want to get too mushy, but I mean, I think it is all pointing to something in the same general territory, if not the same exact thing. And maybe that's love, you know. And this play of duality is part of how love happens, as you said. You know, we couldn't have a conversation, we couldn't make love, we couldn't have this meeting, we couldn't do any of that if we didn't have the appearance of duality, if we didn't have the appearance of this and that. Diversity or whatever. The problem comes when we think, you know, that they're two separate things and that one has to triumph over the other. But this play of whatever we call it is beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, to me, you know, that's not mushy at all. That's just like totally beautiful to you know, just to realize that one of the expressions of this human life, one of the deepest and fullest expressions, is love. You know, love that's given, love that's received. And that needs duality, you know. It's like even in a, you know, a state of deep immersion, deep bliss, deep, you know, totality, you know, love can rise, and it needs to be given. You know, it needs to find some way of being expressed, and you know, so love is not possible without duality. And it's such a, to me, it's just such a deep expression of the potential of this human existence, you know, ultimately, is to come to live this, you know, and it can be very simple. It can be, you know, loving washing the dishes. Mm-hmm. Or being just, you know, putting all your love into cleaning the dishes. Or focusing on another human being, or receiving love, you know. Mm-hmm. As teachers or therapists or, you know, professionals, we so often focus on giving, you know, and the receiving is not part of our you know, our experiential repertoire in the same way. And that's one of the ways that being ill and receiving treatment actually, you know, is also powerful. It opens us to receiving and to the gratitude of all that is given to help us get well.
Yeah, I felt a lot of gratitude through this whole process. I mean, I haven't used that word in this meeting, I don't think, but yeah, immense gratitude just for everything, for life.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, for all the specific things too, my friends and people who supported me and the people on Facebook and the doctors and the nurses and the radiation technologists, but just gratitude for the MRI machine, you know, which is this amazing machine that people have invented that somehow, you know, detects these things. I mean, it's like just, yeah, I felt a lot of gratitude. I still feel a lot of gratitude.
Mm. Yes, one of my overflowing love moments was actually lying in an MRI machine. You know, and it goes on and on and on with these sounds, right? And it's like nothing you can do. So you're in this situation, and I was just overcome by love.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, does anybody else have a question? Or maybe do you want to share your experience with cancer or any other major illness? Does that, is there something that wants to, you know, that just wants to be shared or aired?
I think we're coming to the end of our time too. I'm noticing.
Yes. Yeah. Joan, is there anything else that you want to maybe share with people about, you know, just your learning? Actually, there's a question I wanted to ask you. Maybe we could end with that. How has this experience, how do you feel, if in any way, has this experience, how does that change your teaching? How does that change how you express this truth?
I don't really know. I mean, I've been working on my book. I've been posting a few things on Facebook, and I'm going to start holding meetings again this month. So this is actually the first thing that this conversation with you is the first thing of my sort of being back to work. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know, how am I expressing myself differently than before? Somebody else would have to say, I think, because I don't know. You know, it's my sense is that in some way there's, you know, what I've been expressing in my message has been consistent over all these years. And then my own experience is that it keeps in some ways subtly shifting or deepening and you know, and I think Jed maybe brought this up earlier, but you know, sometimes I think we well, the old saying, we teach what we need to learn. And it also seems to me that we learn the same key lessons sort of over and over again, like just to be here now, or that now is all there is. You know, I mean, my first Zen teacher was saying that to me years ago, and it was, you know, it's sort of like you get it, and then you get it in maybe more deeply or more subtly, or then you get it again, and then you're reminded again, and then you get it again. And it's sort of like, there's no end to awakening, in my opinion. There's no end to this whole process. There's no end to now, basically. There's no end to now, and it's ever new. And yeah, I mean, I'm sure that in some ways it'll be different, and in some ways it'll be the same. And I can't really assess how that is. We'll see what happens when I start, you know, doing my groups or something. I mean, or this is the first thing where I've been talking to people in this way since. Since all this happened. I just want to say thank you to everybody who's been here. Many of whom I recognize and know and love dearly, and some of whom I don't know, but and you know, I appreciate everything Bill shared, and he's not there on video anymore, but and about his situation. And anyway, just gratitude for everyone here. And
I think Bill's just coming back.
Yeah, he shows up again.
all the best to you, Bill, and all the best to you, Joan.
Thank you, Grace.
You keep us posted on Facebook.
Okay. Oh, there's a hand raised.
Yeah.
Shannon raised hand.
Okay, so Shannon, I'm going to, where is she? Okay. Shannon, I'm going to unmute you. You're unmuted.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to say thank you, and thank you for hosting, and thank you to Joan for coming out and laying it all out there. And I guess I've heard you speak before, and I think I've been in some live sessions, and I feel a deep sense of appreciation for your grace and kind of just, you know, that showing up naked and being, you know, in that is beautiful and wonderful. And I'm just very, very grateful for both of you. And Grace, your microphone is sort of going in and out. So sometimes you're very, very faint in the last few minutes. I don't know if it's just me or everybody.
No, it was very faint for a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you, Shannon. Yes, I'm sorry about the microphone. Joan, it would have been helpful to let me know.
Oh, it's just a little bit at the end. It seemed fine, and it wasn't,
okay.
You know, so I didn't want to interrupt the flow of what you were saying.
Okay. So, where was I? I feel very grateful. You know, I feel very grateful to you, Joan, for being willing to come on and speak about this experience and really explore with us, you know, how that feeds back into the teaching, how that feeds back into your understanding of what is, of truth, of love. And thank you to those of you who ask questions. You know, questions are always asked not just for you, but for others too. We all benefit from questions. And lastly, I just wanted to say, if you haven't made a donation towards the cost of this, conversation yet, we'd be grateful that you do. A proportion of whatever is donated goes to Joan, and a proportion goes to myself, supporting me in offering these conversations and other live online events.
It's wonderful that you do offer these.
Yeah, well, it's, it's part of what this life is all about. And, it's in encountering death that we come to be much more clear about what it is that we need to share. So, I'm also not surprised that the doubting mind that was there about your sharing has fallen away, because that is a gift of that encounter, it's just for there to be less noise and more clarity about this needs to be done, this needs to be shared, this needs to happen. And it's my joy that it happens, Yeah, so thank you all for being with us today. And thank you again to Joan.
Thank you, and everyone.
And just want to remind you that the next conversation is this coming Saturday with Ananta Kranti on caring for a demented elderly parent. So if you want to find out about these conversations, you can go to living-from-love.com, and you'll see the other ones that are that are planned. Okay. Wishing you all well. Thank you. And see you soon.